Hello anime fan, welcome back to What If Animes 2.0. So in this video you gonna see, what if Naruto teleport in One Piece universe? This is part 1. And if you want more then hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. So let's getting the video and do check out the author of the story. Naruto gasped for air as he lurched forward, throwing a punch out at whatever was nearby, only for it to be caught by the dark-haired man with a strange-looking tattoo on the left side of his face. Calm down, no one here is going to hurt you, the strange man said in a rather low voice. Taking a deep breath, Naruto pulled his fist back and sat up in the bed, wincing as his chest hurt from the wounds he had suffered. Where am I? Naruto asked as he recalled what had happened shortly before he blacked out. He had been fighting against Kagaya and managed to activate the seal to release the tailed beasts from within her and contain her inside of a massive Chibaku Tensei. However, with the last of her strength she managed to open one last portal and pushed him through. Kakashi had tried to use his Kamui to save him, but the last thing he heard before everything went black was the sound of something breaking. "You're on my ship. We were sailing when we saw a large storm rapidly forming before you fell out into the ocean. The moments later it vanished," the man explained as he didn't really know what to make of the blonde teen before him. He had assumed that the storm had been caused by him as it had been a rather cloudless day before he appeared, but when he found him he was floating on the water. Something that should have been impossible if he had a devil fruit. Having looked the teen over, he could tell that he had been in a rather difficult battle if the wear and tear on his clothing was anything to go by. Judging by the headband he wore, he assumed that perhaps he had been a shinobi from the land of Wano. "Well, I guess thanks for the save," Naruto said looking down at his hands. He had no idea where he was, but one thing that confused him was, how was this man not trapped in the infinite Tsukuyomi? It should have been impossible without Indra's power shielding them. "My name's Uzumaki Naruto by the way," he said introducing himself. "Monkey D. Dragon," the man replied in kind. Naruto looked at him with a questioning look. "Yes?" Dragon asked him with a raised eyebrow. "I was expecting your actual name, but I guess if you want to use your moniker that's okay," the blonde shinobi replied as he understood why the man would use a fake name instead of giving a random stranger his. "That is my real name," Dragon confirmed as his own eyebrow twitched slightly. No one had ever questioned if his name was real or not before, but the look on the blonde's face was almost one of someone told a lame joke. Naruto had never heard of someone with such a strange name. Sure, Anbu had code names like Monkey and Dragon all the time, but for it to be someone's actual name was kinda bizarre. "If you say so," he mumbled as he felt Kurama's chakra healing his injuries. He smiled at the feeling of his friend's chakra coursing through him. It was comforting to know that even in this strange situation, the fox was still there with him. "Are you from the land of Wano?" Dragon asked him, wanting to confirm his theory before he jumped to any conclusions. The confused look on Naruto's face was enough to answer Naruto's question, but what he said next had him more confused. "Never heard of it, I'm from Hidden Leaf Village in the Land of Fire," he replied. Dragon had heard of the Land of Fire, but he doubted that Naruto was from the place he was thinking of. Kilauea was a blistering place covered mostly in flames. Nothing lived there as far as he knew, let alone an entire village of people. "I see," Dragon replied simply before hearing a growl coming from Naruto's stomach. "Let me get you something to eat," he said standing up before walking out to go get some food and think on what he had learned from the blonde. That man had no chakra. Naruto, the shinobi heard inside his head as Kurama decided that now that the man was gone, it would be a good time to talk with his Jinchuriki. "And as far as I know there has never been a land of Wano anywhere in the world. I fear that in his attempt to save you, your sensei sent us to another universe?" Naruto replied in a half-certain tone, hoping that Kurama would try and correct him and call his idea silly. "Correct," Kurama confirmed in a heavy tone as he didn't want to believe it any more than Naruto did. "I can't sense anyone we know. Not even your teammates. More so, I can sense several people on board the ship and even more a few miles out. None of them have chakra. And even if they did, why aren't they trapped by the Shinju?" Kurama told Naruto, who nodded his head solemnly, accepting that this was their current situation. "Any way to get back?" he asked his lifelong companion. Kurama didn't answer for a while before letting out a heavy sigh. "No. As far as I know, there is no way back that I know of," the Kyuubi said in response to the question, dashing any hope his container had of them being able to return back home. Neither of them knew much about time-space ninjutsu, and even if they did, it was impossible to replicate what landed them here to begin with. Neither had Kaguya's power or Obito's Sharingan. The door opened to reveal Dragon bringing in a plate with some steak, mashed potatoes, and some vegetables. However, looking at the blonde, he could see tears starting to fall down his whiskered cheeks. "Something the matter?" Dragon asked as he came over and set the plate on the night table besides the blonde. "Dragon, do you have a map of the world?" Naruto asked, not able to raise his head. He knew the answer. He knew that the map wouldn't look anything like the world he knew. But part of him wanted to hold on to the hope that maybe, he was just in some remote and unexplored region of the world. Dragon nodded his head and called for someone to bring them a map. Another man came in and handed Dragon a rolled-up piece of parchment. "Here," he said, opening it up for Naruto, expecting him to point out where he was from. Naruto, however, felt the last of his hope draining away. "This is not our world," Kurama reaffirmed upon seeing the map. Dragon's eyes widened as he witnessed Naruto's eyes turning blood red. His pupils slitted as he looked down at the map of the world. "This isn't my world," he muttered as he tried to cope with the knowledge that he was not in his homeworld anymore and had no practical way to return. Gritting his teeth, he felt his anger bubbling up. The wood of the bed and room started to crack and splinter as his chakra radiated out angrily. "Conqueror's haki?" Dragon wondered as he felt the pressure radiating from the blonde. He felt his anger weighing down on him and even affecting the area around them. The man who had handed Dragon the map seemed to be having a worse reaction compared to the revolutionary leader. "Naruto, I would ask that you contain your haki," he said, hoping to knock the blonde out of his anger. Taking another breath, Naruto calmed himself, seeing the other man nearly pissing himself. Something Naruto had said did catch his attention. "This isn't my world." So many questions swirled in Dragon's head, wondering what that could have meant. Looking at the map Naruto had asked for and the reaction he had when he laid his eyes upon it, as well as the strange storm and appearance, the conclusion he came to was that Naruto wasn't from this planet. It sounds weird to even think about it, but given what some devil fruits could do, it's not so outlandish to believe, Dragon thought to himself. He had some reservations about believing the blonde, but he didn't seem to be hiding his emotions. "Sorry. I guess this world isn't your own, is it?" Dragon asked, getting straight to the point. A nod from the blonde was the answer he expected. "Then you can stay on my ship until we reach the next island. After that, you're free to go on your own or join us in the Revolutionary Army," Dragon offered, believing that even if Naruto was an enemy spy, it would be for the best to keep a close eye on him and see if they could get information out of him. "Revolutionary Army?" Naruto asked. Dragon nodded his head. "Right. We are a group who are fighting against the world government to free everyone from the control and corruption of the world nobles," he told the blonde, who raised an eyebrow at the terms that Dragon had used. Seeing the confused look on Naruto's face, Dragon decided to elaborate some more. "Currently most of the world is under the control of the world government, who use their military branch known as the Marines to maintain their authority across the planet by offering protection from pirates. However, while the Marines claim to fight for justice, the corruption they bring often devastates the poorer islands, making them pay heavenly tribute to the world nobles, even at the cost of starvation. On top of that, the world government has experimented on the poor and defenseless for centuries. They are the evil we seek to destroy, and sold thousands into slavery," Dragon explained to the blonde shinobi, not mincing his words as he explained the cruelties of the world government. How they took advantage of the weak. Naruto didn't say anything as Dragon spoke, waiting for the man to finish before in the natural energy of the world, he could feel that it was different from what he was used to but served its purpose nonetheless. Using Kurama's ability to sense negative emotions and amplifying it with his sage mode, he extended his senses as far as he could. A scowl smeared across his face as he felt the pain and suffering of the people in this world. Opening his eyes to reveal that they had changed colors from blue to orange with cross-shaped pupils. As he released his sage mode, he looked at Dragon with a frown. "This world really is suffering," he said before looking at the food beside him. "I'll let you know my answer after I finish my food. I need to think on some stuff," Naruto stated. "Right, I'll let you rest for now," Dragon replied as he had some more things to think about as well as having to manage his ship. A few hours passed as he laid in bed, trying to come to terms with his current situation in this apparently different world. As far as he knew, he was stuck here. For now, all of his precious people were back in his world, still trapped in the God Tree as far as he knew. Maybe Sasuke would manage to get back and undo the jutsu. He had no way of knowing. Part of him wanted to give up, to just let it all go and wallow in his misery. In the dread of knowing that his friends and allies might be forever lost because of Kaguya's last spite against them. But he knew that all of his friends would be disappointed in him if he just gave up. Even if they were lost, they would want him to continue to carry the will of wire. To protect what was precious to him. I think we should join Dragon, Naruto said to Kurama, believing that if he was stuck here, he might as well continue to fight for a good cause. And freeing people from oppression seemed like a pretty good one to get behind. Before Kurama could reply, the ship shook as the sounds of explosions filled the air. It's the Marines. Man your stations, one of the revolutionaries yelled out as people ran through the halls to get ready for battle. Rushing up to the deck, Naruto spotted Dragon at the helm of the ship. He could see several dozen ships coming towards them, firing cannons in rapid sessions at them. What's going on, Dragon? He asked, looking at the incoming ships. At the front of one of the ships he spotted an extremely tall tanned man with curly hair that came down to his shoulders. He was wearing a white coat over what appeared to be a white vest with a blue long-sleeve shirt and white pants. Dragon looked over at Naruto. The Marines found us, and they sent an admiral after us, he told the blonde as a cannonball was shot straight at them but was caught by the blonde with his bandaged hand before throwing it off the side of the ship as he looked at the man who stood firmly at the front of the headship. He's so tall. Naruto muttered as he was reminded how short he was before he went on his 3-year training trip with Jiraiya. Dragon chuckled at how despite being confronted with one of the strongest members of the Marines, Naruto seemed to get distracted by Aokiji's height. It reminded him of how his son was according to the intel he got. However, he knew that this was a serious situation. As far as he knew, he was the only one on the ship currently able to take on an admiral without getting completely wiped out. Naruto felt a large gust of wind pick up, bellowing against the sails of the ship, causing it to quickly pick up speed. However, the curly-haired man seemed to respond to the wind by seemingly freezing the ocean, the ice rushing across the sea towards the ship to freeze it in place for them to catch up. Shit! Dragon cursed as he prepared to try and counter the incoming ice. Rasen Shuriken. He heard Naruto's voice from behind him as an orb of energy with 4 spinning blades around it flew past him. He could feel the wind whipping around the jutsu as it soared by towards the encroaching ice. His eyes widened as it exploded into a massive orb of millions of microscopic blades of wind that shredded the ice, stopping it in its tracks. The wind generated by the Rasen Shuriken further helped push them forward and the Marines back. Naruto breathed heavily for air as he still hadn't recovered fully from his injuries and having fought for nearly 2 days straight against godlike beings. Looking at the blonde, Dragon couldn't help but smile as he felt that maybe he had found a gem in the middle of the ocean. Not bad, he said as the Marines seemed to be getting further and further away from them. You haven't seen anything yet, Naruto replied with a wide smirk as he sat down on the floor of the ship to rest. Leaning against the railing of the Wind Grandma, Naruto looked up as he sensed something flying overhead. Coming down from the sky, he saw several pieces of paper rain down from the presence above. Picking one up, he saw a picture of his face on it, his eyes showing that he was in his base 6 paths sage mode. It didn't have a name registered, since the Marines didn't know his name yet, but his bounty seemed to be 100 million of the currency of this world. Congrats on your wanted poster, Dragon said as he walked up to Naruto holding his own copy of the piece of paper. 100 million berry is nothing to scoff at, the tattooed man stated as he joined Naruto against the rail, looking out at the sea. He was sure the high bounty was due to the fact that he had been spotted next to him. Aokiji probably assumed that Naruto was a rather high-ranking member who had stayed hidden until now. How does it feel being an enemy of the world? He asked the blonde who sighed. Not even a week here and I'm already a criminal. He lamented as he looked at the picture. But if I knew that they were going to be taking a picture I would have looked cooler. He joked as he had to admit that the picture they got of him looking serious was far from the worst picture he could have gotten. How did you do it? Dragon asked, having never seen Haki do that before. Having a devil fruit would explain it, but he had found Naruto floating in the ocean unconscious. Had he been a devil fruit user, he would have sunk and drowned due to the negative effects that the fruit has when in contact with seawater. So unless the blonde was about to completely uproot the entire world's basic knowledge of devil fruits, it had to have been something else. I used my chakra, Naruto replied as he held his hand out and created a Rasengan in the palm of his hand. How did Sakura explain it? It's a mixture of the body's physical and spiritual energy. I don't know if that really makes sense. Naruto stated as he didn't really know how to explain chakra to someone who wouldn't know anything about it at all. Even most civilians in his world knew about chakra and the basics of it. Interesting, Dragon said as he looked at the orb in Naruto's hand, which looked similar to the core of the attack he used before to stop Kuzan's ice. Would it be possible for others to learn how to harness it? He asked the golden-haired shinobi, wondering if it was possible to teach their weaker members how to use it as well. It would help drastically increase their military might. I don't think so, people are typically born with chakra and chakra pathways. I don't sense any in you or anyone else on the ship, Naruto replied as he didn't know how he felt about possibly introducing chakra to this world after how it had gone when Hagoromo did it to the people of his world. Dragon sighed as he figured that might have been the case. If something like that could just be learned, then it would have become like hockey where the strongest taught their crews how to use it. Shame, Dragon said before one of the crewmen yelled that they were nearing a place called Alabasta. Well, it seems we'll be making landfall soon. Have you made your choice yet? He asked, referring to if Naruto was going to stay with them or continue off on his own for now. I think I'll stay with you guys for a bit. After all, I guess I'm already a criminal, and I don't think becoming a pirate is something my precious people would be happy to hear, he replied, knowing that if his friends and family would hear that he become a pirate of all things, they would likely be very disappointed in him. Besides, where would I go? I don't know anything about this place, so I figure staying with you guys is for the best for now, he added on as he didn't even know how to properly sail a ship. Sure, he could learn, but it seemed like every day the weather would change sporadically. Yeah, it would be a bad idea to sail on his own. Dragon smiled as he was happy to have the young blonde willing to join them. He had already shown him that he was rather powerful even when injured. And the Marines wouldn't expect to fight, well, an alien human. Glad to hear, I'll give you some berry to get some new clothing, just be careful of pirates and bandits. Alabasta has been having some local conflicts as of late, Dragon warned as he handed Naruto a wad of berry to spend on himself. Naruto still only had his tattered clothing he wore during the war. It wasn't exactly comfortable for someone to walk around in rags. Walking through the streets, he learned that this place was called Nanohana, which served as the main port of the kingdom. He considered himself lucky that the common language here was considerably similar to the one back in his home world. Looking around, he spotted a shop that seemed to be selling clothing. Walking in, he decided to have a look around and buy himself something. After around half late, he walked out wearing an orange long coat that left his chest exposed with a red scarf around his neck and white pants. For shoes, he decided to keep his toeless sandals. Around his waist was his headband, so his hair could be more loose. It had cost him around half his money, but in the end it was better than the rags he had been wearing before. How about you leave me alone? A female voice said to a group of what looked to be intoxicated Marines. A frown appeared on his face as they seemed to be rather aggressive when it came to trying to get the women to come with them. Come on, I'm sure we can make it worth your time, miss, one of the Marines said with a lecherous grin as he looked at the rather tall woman. She wore a fur-lined white coat over a purple corset that left little to the imagination and a matching miniskirt. Her face was largely obscured by a large white and purple cowboy hat. Or maybe we should detain you for refusing to comply with the Marines, he threatened. I think she gave you your answer already, Naruto said, deciding not to let the Marines use their authority to take advantage of the woman. Then the group of 4 Marines looked over at the blonde with annoyed looks on their faces. The woman seemed curious as to the sudden involvement of the blonde, moving back to let him distract the Marines while she made her escape. Hey, it's that whiskered freak from the new wanted poster. He's worth 100 million berry. One of the other Marines yelled as he recalled seeing the wanted posters that were delivered to their base on Alabasta. Oi. Name's Uzumaki Naruto, not whiskered freak. Naruto yelled as he felt insulted by being called that. After all these years, seeing one of them try to pull out their gun, he rushed forward and punched him in the face, sending him flying back. The other one tried to help his fellow Marines by punching at Naruto only for his fist to be caught and thrown into another Marines. The last one aimed his gun at Naruto but froze when he felt dread filling him. Walking up to him, Naruto grabbed the gun and yanked it out of his hands, causing the man to stumble back in fear. Scram! Naruto ordered as the Marines picked up their things and grabbed their unconscious member before running away. Looking back, he found that the woman had decided to get away while she could. Sighing, he decided to leave the area as well as many seemed shocked at someone attacking Marines like that. Finding a place to sit down and eat some food, Naruto decided to order some meat with rice and a mug of beer. Sighing, he leaned back and took a sip of his fifth beer. After everything he had been through, he needed something to calm his nerves. "Well, I didn't expect to find my hero here," the woman from before said, sitting down in front of him. She had seen his wanted poster around and figured that he was one of those pirates that had some morals. "Mind if I join you?" she asked coyly as she examined the blonde before her. She had caught his name before Uzumaki Naruto. She had never heard of him, yet he had such a high bounty. "If you want," Naruto said as he averted his eyes as her cleavage was on full display for him. "Sorry I never got your name," he asked, figuring that he might as well talk to the woman. "Miss All Sunday," she answered, giving him a kind smile. However, she quickly noticed the frown on Naruto's face. "Codename?" he asked as he felt that she was lying about her name, unlike Dragon. The woman seemed to tense when he called her out on the fake name that she had given him. "Well, Miss Sunday, if you don't want to give me your name, then so be it," he shrugged, not really caring if she wanted to give him her real name or not. However, he could feel a decent amount of darkness within her. Not like Orochimaru or Madara's, but almost like him when he was younger. An anger towards others due to being wronged in the past. "Quite perspectives," she said, following her hands together, happy that he didn't seem to push the issue. Part of her wondered if he knew who she was. The Marines had been too drunk to realize that they were attempting to woo the devil child. "So what brings you to Alabasta?" she asked, wondering what he was doing here. Someone with such a high bounty typically did something to deserve it. Even her bounty wasn't that high yet, and she was considered especially dangerous to the world government. "My ship needed to resupply and I needed new clothing, so I figured I'd get off the ship and buy some stuff," he answered honestly. Dragon had told him to be extremely careful about invoking his name as he was considered an extremely dangerous criminal. Miss All Sunday hummed as she contemplated his words. Given how laid back he was and his tone, he was either a masterful liar, or he was telling the truth. "Well, thank you for helping me back there with those Marines," the woman said, still smiling at the stranger who waved it off. "It was nothing. I don't like seeing others abuse their power," the shinobi responded as he finished his beer and called for another one. "Do you live here?" he asked, wondering about the woman. Given the feeling she gave off, part of him wanted to try and help her. "You never change, do you?" "Always a sucker for a pretty face," Kurama said, snickering at his Jinchuriki's tendency to help women in peril, thinking back to his many missions in the past where he had to protect some princess or priestess or movie star. "Shut up, Kurama." Naruto yelled back in thought. "Only for the last few years, I got a job with a local company," she answered half-truthfully, having figured that if he had seen through her attempt to hide her real name, he might see through the rest of her lies. Whoever this was, he wasn't some random person with a reasonably high bounty. "And you? Where are you from?" she asked, wanting to dig for some information herself. If he was someone potentially important, it would be good to have some information on him. A sour look crossed the blonde's face. "A place, very far away," he muttered, reminded that he would likely never be able to see Konoha again. Miss All Sunday couldn't help but sympathize with the blue-eyed man. Her own home was far out of her reach too. Given the pained look, she figured that something had happened to his home island that now prevented him from returning. "Do you miss it?" she found herself asking. Naruto chuckled as he looked out the window at the sea. "Yeah, it wasn't always the best, but it was home. People took care of each other, and we all worked together to get through whatever the world threw at us. Though some people were assholes, demon brat, this, demon brat, that," he said, recalling how even after everything he did, some were unable to move past his connection to the Kyuubi that had destroyed most of the village and killed many of their loved ones. The dark-haired woman froze a bit when he said, "Demon brat," recalling her own nickname as the devil child. "Demon brat?" she questioned, interested in the nickname. Yeah, they thought I was some sort of monster incarnate. It took a while for people to just see me as well, me. He told her, a bit too drunk for his own good. Often parents would tell their kids not to play with me. Naruto said, thinking back to his childhood. He didn't blame them anymore, he had forgiven them. But that didn't mean that he couldn't reflect on how much it hurt back then. The woman clenched her hands on her skirt as his story seemed to hit a nerve. He's almost like me, she thought to herself as she remembered being called a freak by people back home before she got the nickname of Devil Child. The two continued to talk for the next hour or so. Miss All Sunday had found his tales from home fascinating. He had told her about some of the people that he had fought. While Naruto had decided to omit some of the more extreme examples such as Madara or Kagaya, he talked to her a bit about Zabuza and Haku. Two of the first major shinobi that he had fought. You thought he was a girl? Miss All Sunday asked with a small smirk on her face. Naruto scoffed, I still have my doubts. Like seriously, his face was cuter than yours. He yelled a few beers too deep at this point. The woman rolled her eyes at the unintended compliment from the blonde who was clearly intoxicated. But yeah, he taught me that what's most important is protecting those who are precious to you. Something that I've lived by since then, Naruto declared firmly. They sound like a great person, what happened to them? She asked but regretted it when she saw the saddened expression. I'm sorry, the cowboy hat wearing woman said. She found herself lowering her guard around him. Something about his genuineness and the warm feeling he was radiating made her feel safe around him. He also seemed to not have any idea who she was, something that made her happy as typically people knew who she was already and plotted against her for her bounty. There you are. Dragon's voice came from the door. We need to head out. You caused quite the stir with the Marines with your stunt, he said to the blonde, a bit agitated that Naruto had attracted their attention so soon. Looking at the woman that his new ally was talking to, he couldn't help but narrow his eyes slightly. Nico Robin, you're proving yourself quite troublesome, Naruto, Dragon thought as Naruto sighed and stood up, swaying slightly before a flare of Kurama's chakra helped burn away the alcohol in his body. The woman's eyes widened as she saw the tattooed face of the world's worst criminal. Naruto walked over to Dragon's side and waved at her. Well, looks like I gotta go. See you around, Miss All Sunday. I was nice meeting you, he said before leaving with Dragon. To think you'd strike up a conversion with Nico Robin of all people, Dragon quipped as the two got back on the ship just as Marines started to pour into the port. The Wind Grandma started to sail out of the port as a wind began to pick up again. Nico Robin? Naruto questioned. That's her real name, also known as the Devil Child by the Marines, he informed his blonde companion. Devil Child, huh? The shinobi muttered to himself as it reminded him of his own nickname when he was younger. Why do they call her that? He asked Dragon, who looked out at the sea, the wind helping them outpace the Marines while keeping them away. That's quite a long story, maybe I'll tell you later, Dragon replied as he focused on getting his ship away from the Marines once again. Wind Grandma, so where are we off to now, Dragon? Naruto asked as they sailed through the sea. While he still felt a bit seasick, he was getting more used to being at sea. It had been a few weeks since they left Alabasta and his encounter with the woman known as Nico Robin. Dragon had given him some details about her and her past. How her home had been destroyed by the Marines because they dug those nose too deep into some lost knowledge that they wanted to keep buried. It angered him that the people who were supposed to be protecting the weak were instead using their power to oppress and manipulate the story to make the people of Ohara look like monsters. From what Dragon had told him, not even civilians who weren't involved with the researcher were spared. Nico Robin had been the only survivor. Sabaody Archipelago, we got a tip that a particularly large shipment of slaves were going to be auctioned off soon. Some of them are members of the Revolutionary Army that got captured during a failed mission at a Marine base, Dragon told the blonde as he wanted to save his subordinates on top of the rest of the innocents that had been captured. He knew how cruel the celestial dragons were, especially to people they knew hated them. I have little doubt that if they are sold to the world nobles, they'll be tortured for their own amusement, he almost growled out. A heavy scowl appeared on Naruto's face when he heard that. You know, the more I hear about these bastards, the more I just want to punch one in the face, he commented as everything he had been told about these people made him sick to his stomach. How they treated those under them. How they saw themselves as above humans, above the law even. As far as they were concerned, the law was made for their own benefit and didn't apply to them. And the Marines just accepted it. Dragon chuckled lightly. Careful, if you want to get an admiral called on you. Punching a world noble will typically do the trick, he warned lightly. While he wouldn't mind punching a few of the world nobles himself, he knew that getting an admiral called on them wouldn't exactly be the best idea. A full-on fight with the Marines wouldn't exactly be something he wanted in the middle of an highly populated island. It was that cautiousness that prevented him from talking to Nico Robin when he found her with Naruto in Alabasta. He doubted he would have enough time to convince her to join them before the place was swarmed with Marines. They barely made it out without major conflict to begin with. A wasted opportunity, as Nico Robin would have furthered their goals greatly, but escape was his top concern. Well then, let them come, Naruto said, slamming his fist into the palm of his hand with a wide, confident smirk. He didn't know how powerful these admirals would be, but he figured that if he could fight people like Madara or Kagaya, then he doubted that these admirals would be that much stronger given what he had seen from this world so far. Admirals are no joke, Naruto. I would recommend not taking them too lightly, Dragon told his alien companion. While he doubted that Naruto had shown him his true power, and from what he had already seen, the blonde was exceptionally powerful, he didn't want to take the chance of him underestimating the three admirals and getting in over his head. He didn't even know if Naruto had a way to hit them, since he assumed that hockey wasn't a thing where he came from. Well anyways, what's the plan? Naruto asked as he saw the bubbles of the island appearing in the distance and growing ever closer. He had been growing a bit anxious from being on a ship for so long, and he couldn't wait to stretch his legs on land. We're going to try and break into the auction house and liberate those being held there. A team will try to sneak in through the back entrance, but we'll need a distraction to lure the guards and Marines away from there. Our contact on the island said that a Shishibukai will be guarding the world nobles attending, he said, knowing that whoever would take the job of distracting those who would try to stop them would likely have their work cut out for them. Fighting one of the warlords wasn't an easy feat for most people. He figured that he would probably have to do it himself given that his other commanders were out on their own missions for now. I'll do it, Naruto said casually, feeling that he might as well just go strong with these Shichibukai. He was never one to hide, and that Admiral had already seen him use the Rasen Shuriken. In reality, he wanted to figure out where he stood in this world power-wise. Most of the people on the Wind Grandma didn't really pose much of a challenge for him, and Dragon was too busy for a serious spar against him. Dragon didn't seem too convinced as to letting Naruto go up against someone like a member of the 7 warlords of the sea. Of course he knew who would be the Shichibukai that would be there already. His spy had told him that Bartholomew Kuma would be the one with the world nobles. It so happened that Kuma was also his spy, so he would have to put up a convincing fight against whoever went up against him. Or risk blowing his cover. Are you certain? Members of the Shichibukai have been known to be able to take on entire fleets on their own. Dragon asked to make sure Naruto was certain he wanted this. Normally Dragon would outright refuse someone so new volunteering to perform such a dangerous job. But Naruto had proven himself the strongest among his subordinates. However, the smirk on the blonde's face filled with such confidence swayed him ever so slightly. He could see a strange golden energy starting to rise from the shinobi that made his skin tingle. Trust me, Dragon, I can more than handle myself. After all, I fought a goddess before. How bad can one person be? He claimed, much to the amusement of all the crew members who overheard him. A goddess, he says. Dragon, I think the new guy has gone loony. One of the men laughed out loud. They all knew that the whiskered blonde was exceptionally strong, but to claim to have fought a goddess was absurd. I'll show you, Naruto growled, holding his fist up, ready to clobber whoever doubted him. Enough, the commander of the Revolutionary Army said, ending any discourse on his ship. Naruto, if you feel that you can hold your own, then I'll put my faith in you, he told the blonde, silently hoping that he wasn't making a mistake. Sabaody Archipelago having docked their ship in one of the many ports, Naruto followed behind Dragon through the several areas of the tree-made island. While Naruto was still wearing the outfit he bought in Alabasta, Dragon had pulled his cloak's hood over his head. Apparently, despite the marine base on the island has a rather prosperous dark side. So where are we going? Naruto asked the older man who weaved around people, his face covered by the shadow of his hood. Naruto didn't know exactly where they were going. But Dragon had insisted that they head to some bar before they did anything else on the false island. "We're going to see a few people of interest. No need to think too much about it," Dragon replied, not seeing a need to go more into it as he was certain that Naruto, being from another world, wouldn't know who the people they were going to talk to were. "We're here," the dark-haired man said as they arrived at a building with a green ball for a roof. "Shaki's rip-off bar?" he asked with a flat look on his face. Dragon chuckled as he pushed the doors open and entered the bar, Naruto following closely behind him. Looking around, there were some rather strong-looking pirates around drinking. Behind the counter was a woman with dark hair in a bob cut smoking a cigarette. Walking closer to the bar counter, Dragon sat down. "Anything you'd recommend?" Dragon asked the woman, who looked at the man with a questioning look. "Not every day someone like you comes around," she said before her eyes flickered to Naruto, who sat next to Dragon, and gave her a warm smile. "Must have something to do with the slaves that just got shipped in," the woman commented, placing 2 beers down for them. "And the new revolutionary, Uzumaki Naruto," she said, having seen the updated posters being delivered around the island a few days ago. "How do you know my name?" Naruto asked, wide-eyed by the fact that she knew his name already. "Given you have a wanted poster?" "It's not that hard to guess," she replied in a teasing tone as an older-looking man with long white hair and beard walked out from the back. The man looked at the two and sat down next to Dragon. "To get a bounty of 100 million berry right off the bat, you must have done something pretty bad," the man commented as he looked at the blonde, who chuckled and scratched the back of his head. "Not really, I just stopped." "What was his name?" "Aokoji, was it? He tried to freeze our ship," Naruto asked, looking at Dragon, who facepalmed at the fact that the shinobi had forgotten the name of one of the 3 admirals. "Aokiji," Dragon corrected. The older man laughed out, as the woman handed him a beer as well. "So young and facing the admirals? The new generations really are something else. Right, Shaki?" he asked the woman with a wide smile on his face, as he couldn't help but respect any youngster who had the balls to get between an admiral and his target. Granted, he figured that Dragon would have been able to handle it. "So how can we help you too?" the man asked. "We were hoping that you and Shikayaku would have some information about the auction house." "Really?" Dragon replied to the former right hand of Gold D. Roger. While Kuma had been able to get them a date and time, as to when the slaves would be on the island, he hadn't been able to give them more details due to having needed to be around the world nobles attending the auction. Shaki took a drag of her cigarette as she seemed to contemplate the request from the revolutionary leader. "From what I heard, there is a back room entrance that's typically only guarded by a few Don Quixote pirates that Doflamingo left on the island last time he was here to keep an eye on the establishment. It's a straight shot towards there. They hold the slaves. You just need to find a way to remove the explosive collars," she told the 2 members of the Revolutionary Army. "And of course there is Kuma, who has been spotted on the island with a group of world nobles. Not exactly an easy opponent for the average person," Rayleigh added as he looked at Naruto. "Anything I should know about him?" the blonde asked, wondering what he would be walking into. He of course wanted to make sure that he didn't underestimate his opponent too much. Dragon had told him about many of the devil fruits that existed. He didn't want to run the risk of running into something that could put him in a bad situation if he didn't handle it properly. "Bartholomew Kuma. He ate the Nikyu no Mi. In essence, it allows him to repel just about anything he touches. This includes air, people, and long-range attacks. He's even able to push out the pain and fatigue in people and push it into another. He's also been modified by the world government using cybernetics, making him a cyborg," Rayleigh answered, figuring that the blonde was going to be the one to take on Kuma. While he was still green, his starting bounty spoke for itself. He had to have done something that really grabbed some attention. He typically attacks by pushing the air in ranged attacks, and can condense a large amount into a bomb of sort. He however needs to be able to touch whatever he's repelling with his hands, so they're tie up. He can't use them to block or attack, he mentioned, figuring that the young boy could use all the help he could get against one of the warlords. "Dragon, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to talk to you in the back," Rayleigh said, motioning for the tattooed man to follow. Dragon nodded and looked at Naruto. "Stay here until I return," he ordered, wanting to make sure that the blonde didn't try to leave the bar and get into trouble. Seeing Naruto nod his head, he followed after the older man, who closed the door behind them. "Dragon, are you sure that kid can handle this? I'm not typically one to get involved with your business, but I've never heard of him before the wanted posters dropped." Does he even know how to use haki? The former hand of the Pirate King asked, worried that Naruto would be getting in over his head against someone like Kuma. As far as I know, he doesn't know how to use haki, but I have seen him repel an attack from an admiral while heavily injured. Now that he's fully up and healthy, I need to know where he stands in terms of strength if he's going to continue being part of my army. And if Kuma is too much of an opponent, then I'll step in myself and let the others handle the slaves. Dragon replied, believing in Naruto after what he witnessed on the ship when Aokiji caught up to them. The sheer devastation of his Rasen Shuriken and his claims of having fought against a goddess needed further investigation. You're using a Shichibukai as a test for your new recruit? Rayleigh asked, not sure if he heard right before chuckling. Well, there is probably a good reason. Where did you find this kid anyways? He fell from the sky, Dragon replied, smirking as he left the back rooms only to find that Naruto had beaten up several men with swords. What happened? A few guests got a bit rowdy when they got their bills, but he managed to clean them up. Shaki replied with a smirk as the blonde shinobi had taken care of the pirates with ease. She had been rather surprised with how easily Naruto had been able to deal with the 10 pirates. It looked like he hadn't even tried despite them having pretty sizable bounties. Well, good job, Rayleigh said, looking at the people who attacked his wife. None of them were dead, instead they all had been knocked out without taking too much damage. From the looks of it, they had each been knocked out with just a hit or two. Dragon had mentioned that he couldn't use haki, meaning he beat them all with his natural strength as far as he knew. Dragon rubbed the bridge of his nose. We better leave before the Marines arrive here, he said, pulling his hood down and putting the money down for the drinks they had, but Shaki pushed it back towards him. Consider it a thanks for Whiskers taking care of those punks, she said, having taken a liking to Naruto during the time that Dragon and Rayleigh. Flashback, watching the two men walk to the back to talk about who knew what. Shaki looked at the blonde who drained his beer with less intensity than she was used to compared to others. So why did you join the Revolutionary Army? Shaki asked the blonde while gave her a warm smile. Frankly, it's mainly because Dragon took care of me when I was at my lowest. When he found me, I frankly had nothing. I saw that he had a point when it came to this world's corruption, Naruto said, knowing what he felt when he accessed his power to sense negative emotions. Dragon had felt like someone he could trust while the world itself felt horrible due to the corruption of the world government. Shaki took another drag of her cig as she listened to Naruto. Just understand that once you directly go against the world nobles by helping Dragon with this, there won't be any going back for you. Especially if you end up hurting one of them, she warned, knowing that those people never let anything go. Once you got on their bad side, you were going to stay there until you died. If the world nobles and Marines are as bad as I've heard and seen, then I don't care if they hate me, he responded, feeling that the government that managed the majority of the world was extremely flawed. He didn't think that everyone in the Marines were bad, but they were complicit in the atrocities they committed. Dragon had told him about what happened back on Ohara when he asked about Nico Robin. To wipe out everyone, even those who weren't involved in the crimes committed that got the Buster Call ordered, that was insane. I see, well, I don't particularly disagree. I've seen a lot of shitty things in my life. What do you seek to accomplish? She asked him, wondering if he was just another of Dragon's lackeys or if he had his own goals in mind. Naruto's smile turned somber at the question, almost as if he was remembering something fondly from his past. I want to bring peace to the world, so no one has to die a needless death. Where everyone can live in harmony, he told her honestly as he thought back to his time with Jiraiya before his death at the hands of Nagato. Live in harmony, huh? Sounds nice, but given how people are, I say that might just be impossible, she said as the drunken men looked at their bills in shock and began to get riled up by just how much they were being charged by the owner. Naruto smirked. I've been known to make the impossible possible, ya know, he told her, confident that he would one day be able to do it. He didn't know how, but he had seen back in his homeworld how people could all band together. If it could be done once, it could be done again, he was certain of it. Hey bish. Was with these pieces. He slurred out, clearly drunk beyond being able to talk and walk normally as he stumbled against the counter, his bill in hand showing an extraordinarily high total. That's your bill, so pay up, Shaki insisted as she wasn't about to lower the prices for these scumbags. Fuck off. The man yelled as he pulled his sword out but had his face slammed into the counter by Naruto. Captain. The crew yelled as their leader was knocked out by the blonde man who stood up and cracked his knuckles, the man sliding off the counter and onto the floor. The rest was over quickly. Despite being vastly outnumbered, Naruto managed to get out completely unscathed from the altercation. Flashback end. It was nothing. Naruto replied with a wide smile as Dragon motioned for him to follow as he took the money back and went for the exit. Given how much the woman charged for her services normally, he wouldn't look a gift horse in the mouth. See you two later, the blonde shinobi called out as he walked after the older man. Rayleigh smiled as he watched the two leave. It's rare for you to take such a liking to someone so quickly, he said to her as he leaned back against the bar counter. Shaki smiled as she looked at the blonde walking alongside Dragon. Or maybe Dragon was walking alongside him. I have a feeling he will help change the world one day, she told her husband. There was just something about him that made her want to trust him. The way he spoke with such conviction and certainty in his beliefs. He said he wants to bring peace to the world, Shaki said with a chuckle. What a dream. People have achieved the impossible, the older man replied, recalling his past alongside Gold D. Roger. Wind Grandma Dragon and his crew were going over the plan one last time before they begun their operation to free their friends and the rest of the slaves from the auction house. Naruto will start by causing a conflict to bait out Bartholomew Kuma from inside, the tattooed man said looking at the blonde who was leaning against a wall. Naruto, I cannot stress it enough that you do not kill him if it gets to that point. Try and incapacitate him as best you can, but killing is completely out of the question, he stressed, knowing that shinobi from Wano typically went for the kill. Naruto claimed not to be from there, but he figured they might have some similarities. While he might be posing as their enemy, that was mainly for show. Kuma was one of his most trusted comrades who had helped him on countless missions. He was currently risking everything by getting so close to the world government and he couldn't risk blowing his cover. It was why he would try and push Naruto away if he could make it seem realistic. If not, then Dragon would step in and save the blonde teen. Killing isn't really my style, Naruto replied, having avoided killing many people throughout his career as a shinobi. Sure, there were times where had no other choice, but typically he tried to keep his opponents alive. Good, then a small team of us will infiltrate the auction house and make our way to the cells where they're holding the slaves. Luckily we know how to safely remove the slave collars without setting them off, Dragon said as they had someone who knew how to undo the collars. Naruto stopped listening halfway as he decided to talk with Kurama. Really getting into this, huh? Kurama asked as he didn't expect his partner to go so headlong into this whole revolutionary deal. Not like I have many other choices. I'm kinda already a criminal according to the people who run this place. From what I've seen, our options are to stay here and try to help people, become pirates and rob people, or join the Marines and scam people, or explore and hope we end up doing anything. But our best chance of bringing peace to this world is with Dragon, Naruto said, having thought about what he could do if he decided to leave the Revolutionary Army. His choices were kinda limited. Fair points, Kurama replied as he could see where Naruto was coming from. I guess it would be good for us to know how we compared to these Shichibukai if we're going to try and help this world. If we find ourselves lacking, then we'll likely need to focus more on training, the Kyuubi stated as he knew that they wouldn't get that far if they were defeated fairly easily. Dragon had mentioned something about the Yonko, which seemed to be almost like the cage of pirates. They would most likely be opponents they would have to face at some point in the future. I'm sure we can take him, I refuse to let our dream die, Naruto replied as he was confident that if Dragon had been willing to let him fight, then he expected him to be able to at the very least survive against this Kuma person. After all, he would be a piss-poor distraction if he died instantly. How are you going to go about it? Will you use my chakra? The Titanic Fox asked the blonde who contemplated how far he would go against Kuma. I think I'll start off with Sage Mode. Given what that Aokiji guy did when he attacked our ship, I don't think going in without at least that might bite us in the ass, Naruto told Kurama as he knew that being punched while in Sage Mode was a very different from being punched in his base form. A punch that would knock him out normally would only knock him back while in Sage Mode. Dismissed, Dragon said as he finished going over the plan with the crew of the ship. Walking out of the room, Naruto walked to the room he had been given on board the Wind Grandma. Getting into bed, he looked up at the ceiling and steeled himself knowing that tomorrow he'd have his first major fight in this world. Naruto took a deep breath as he stood on the roof of a building overlooking the auction house. He could see people starting to enter it, some people wearing strange suits with bubbles around their heads. So those are them. I guess Dragon was right, they feel so superior that they refuse to breathe the same air as everyone else. Naruto thought to himself as he looked over at the man who was following behind them. His eyebrow twitched once again at just how tall the man was. He had finally reached a height where he was taller than most of his friends, and now here he was in a world where half the people were massive. So that's Kuma, huh? Like everyone else he lacks any chakra, Kurama said as he sensed that despite being so large and supposedly powerful, Bartholomew Kuma didn't have any chakra in him. This made it hard to gauge just how strong these people were, since ordinarily those with a lot of chakra tended to also be very powerful. Naruto, do you read me? They heard Dragon's voice coming through the watch they had been given that had a Den Mushi inside. Apparently this world used snails for long-range communication. Strange, but whatever worked. Bringing the snail closer to his face, he cautiously replied, "I hear you, Dragon," he said to the snail, which he assumed would send the message to Dragon's own, who would speak it in his voice. "Whenever you're ready, we're in position now," the revolutionary leader told him, giving him the clear to attack. "Right," the blonde said as he began to pull in nature energy from the surroundings, orange markings appearing around his eyes and his eyes shifting to resemble a toad's with amber irises. With his Sage mode active, he created 2 more clones to leave behind and gather energy while he fought. "Let's do this," Naruto said to himself before vanishing in a burst of speed. Slave auction house. "I wonder what kind of slaves they'll have today, Tilda," one of the men with a bubble around his head said cheerfully as he was looking forward to buying a new toy for his son. He heard that they had some special products today that they had just gotten in. Like the vast majority of celestial dragons, he didn't see anyone who lived outside of Mary Joieuse as nothing more than slaves and tools for his pleasure. "Maybe we can acquire a mermaid, we need one for our pond after the last one died, a worthless waste of money," the woman beside him said, angry that the mermaid they had bought to keep as a pet had died after their kids decided to play with it. Couldn't handle a few cuts, she scoffed as she felt that for the price they paid, the creature should have been able to handle a few cuts. Kuma didn't say anything as he stood behind the two, silently seething at what he was hearing. However, he knew that had to pretend to be loyal to the world government for now. As they were going to enter the building, he suddenly turned around and brought his hand up, repelling whoever had attacked them. "Get inside," he said firmly as he got a good look at who Dragon had sent to fight against him. He had never seen the teen in front of him. Spiky blonde hair and whisker marks on his cheeks. Then was his eyes. Kuma noted that they looked like those of a toad. A zone fruit user? Naruto slid to a stop as he looked at his fist. He figured that was Kuma's power to repel anything that hit the palms of his hands. "So you're the Shichibukai Bartholomew Kuma, huh?" Naruto said, standing back up and rolling his shoulders. Up close he could really see just how massive this man was, standing at over 22 feet tall. "Uzumaki Naruto, a member of the Revolutionary Army," Kuma said in a cold voice, putting his Bible away. He didn't want to risk it getting damaged in a fight against someone he knew nothing about. The only thing he heard about him was that he was able to stop Admiral Aokiji's attack, something which was impressive on its own. "Why are you here?" "To kick your ass," he replied before rocketing forward towards the man, cracking the ground behind him. Kuma narrowed his eyes as his cyborgetics kicked in to keep track of the incoming blonde. Ordinarily he would have used his fruit to push his opponent farther away, but he needed for this fight to go on long enough so Dragon could finish his mission. As Naruto neared him, he swung his hand at him to swat him away before his fist could connect. When he had blocked his previous punch, he'd sensed 2 things coming in contact with his palm. He couldn't tell what the other thing was, his sensors hadn't picked up anything. He hadn't seen anything either with his observation haki. He didn't want to find out what that was, but he figured it was part of Naruto's devil fruit. The slap connected with Naruto, but upon contact the blonde teen was replaced with what looked to be a log that got knocked away instead. "What?" Kuma thought before feeling the wind shifting above him. He barely jumped out of the way when Naruto slammed down from the sky holding a ball of blue energy in his hand. Never in his life had Kuma seen such an attack. And that just raised more questions. How did he substitute himself with a log? What was that ball in his hand? "Dragon, who is this kid?" Kuma asked in his head as he thrusted his palm at Naruto, sending a paw-shaped bubble of condensed air at the blonde who used the force of the attack to blow himself out of the way of his pad ho. "You're pretty quick for someone so big," Naruto commented with a smirk on his face as he was starting to get a sense for how this guy fought. His power had uses both in up-close and in ranged combat. Summoning 6 kunai from the seals on his wrist, he threw them all at Kuma, spreading them out. "Sasuke, if I ever see you again, you're a genius for this." Kuma swung his arm, pushing the air away in front of him to knock the blades away, but they exploded when the air hit them, creating a massive smokescreen of black smoke. He ducked as a kick cut through the smoke, blowing it away with the force it had behind it. Kuma turned and slammed his palm into Naruto's abdomen, pawing him straight back through a building only for the ground under him to break and the blonde erupting out, slamming his fist into his jaw in a powerful uppercut. Even with his enhancements, the force of the blow was enough to lift him up off the ground and into the air. A copy of the blonde came down doing a spinning heel drop towards his chest. Kuma brought his hand up and blocked the kick with his pawed hand, but only blew away only smoke that took the place of Naruto. Landing on his feet, he rubbed his chin as he didn't expect the uppercut to be so heavy. Looking back at Naruto, he noticed that there were 2 now in front of him. "He's pretty sturdy," the Naruto clone said as he felt just how hard the man's chin was when he punched it. "You sure we don't need Kurama's chakra?" he asked, figuring that they could probably wrap things up much faster if they borrowed the fox's chakra to fight. "Nah, we can take our time," the original one said, since Dragon hadn't given them the signal that everyone was out. He didn't want to mess up his first major mission after all. "Multiple abilities?" Kuma questioned as he tried to wrap his head around how someone could use so many unconnected powers. It was unheard of. One explanation was Haki, but he had never heard of Haki making clones. Part of him was happy that someone so strange and powerful had joined the Revolutionary Army instead of the Marines. However, part of him was irritated that he wasn't given a bit of information about just who he was going to be going up against. "You've never fought someone like me," Naruto replied as the 2 rushed towards Kuma, who got into a stance to counter the 2. Slamming his hand into the ground, he used his power to cause a massive shockwave to blow back everything around him. The 2 Naruto saw this in time to reach by jumping back, out of range of the wave. "Senpo, Futon Daitapa." The clone called out as he ran through the hand signs for the jutsu before exhaling a massive gale out of his mouth towards Kuma, enhancing the normally basic wind-styled jutsu with the senjutsu chakra within him. "Senpo, Kaden Gokakyu no Jutsu." The real blonde yelled, breathing out a massive fireball that seared towards the Shichibukai. As the 2 jutsu met, the wind amplified the flames, causing the fire to rapidly expand and grow in power. Kuma held his hands up towards the incoming inferno and began to compress the air around it, trapping the fireball in a massive paw-shaped bubble that started to shrink into Kuma's hand. The fireball inside followed suit as it condensed with the air until Kuma held a bright orange paw bubble in his hands, the flames contained within. "Yurususu Shaku," Kuma said as he pushed the bubble away from himself and towards the 2 blondes. Naruto's eyes widened as Kuma condensed his entire attack along with the air around it into an attack before throwing it back at him. His clone rushed into action and got in the way of the bubble. As it hit the clone, the air and flames inside rapidly decompressed, resulting in a massive explosion that blew away several buildings and sprayed fire across the area. "Senpo, Doden Doryuheki," Naruto said as he slammed his hand down on the ground. A large wall of earth rose up in front of him to protect him from the Yurususu Shaku. His Sage mode faded as he used the last of its power to reinforce the wall so it could withstand the combined force for the Kumo's attack and his own combined jutsu. Popping one of the 2 clones he left back to gather natural energy, his Sage mode returned to him as the wall crumbled. "You underestimated him. Had that attack hit you, it could have done some real damage," Kurama chastised as he felt that if Naruto had thought things through more, he would have realized that Kuma could realistically just push back his jutsu. Had Naruto's own attack landed against himself, it would have likely caused a bit more damage than either wanted to admit. Luckily, the clone had sacrificed itself to help muffle the blast. "I wanted to see if there was a time gap between his pushes like Nagato had, but it seems he can go straight from one to another," Naruto responded, figuring that as long as anything touched Kuma's hands, He could push them back and even condense things with them like he did to his jutsu. Crossing his fingers, he created 2 more clones of himself at his sides as Kuma rushed towards him, thrusting his hand towards the middle blonde only for the 2 clones to intercept, each grabbing one of his arms and janking them back while the original launched forwards and slammed his fist into Kuma's stomach, sending him flying back. Slamming his feet into the ground, Kuma planted himself to stop his flight. Looking up, he saw the 3 blondes rushing at him, attempting to flank him from both sides while one ran straight towards him. Raising his arms up, he began to rapidly thrust them at the shinobi, unleashing a barrage of pressurized air bubbles. The 3 Narutos smirked as they each threw down a red ball that exploded in red smoke. Kuma's attack repeatedly pierced through smoke, leaving holes until the smoke had been completely blown away, but the Narutos had vanished as well. Kuma looked around the area, making sure to keep in mind the area under him as Naruto had already shown that he could attack from underground as well. The blonde was proving himself increasingly more tedious to fight against. He had yet to use that attack that blew away Aokiji's ice as well, from behind. Kuma thought as his sensors picked up a sudden movement from behind him. Turning around, he saw Naruto throwing a giant shuriken at him. Raising his hand, he prepared to use Puni against the blade and knock it away. However, as his devil fruit pushed away the large weapon, a second one came right after, hiding in its shadow that transformed into Naruto holding a Rasengan in each hand. His eyes widened as he quickly tried to swing his other hand at him, but a golden claw of flame-like energy came out from one of the ruined buildings and pulled his arm back. Senpo. Rasengan. The Naruto before him yelled as he slammed the 2 spheres into his stomach. Blood came bursting from his mouth as the attack tore apart his shirt, pushing directly into his skin. Wind whipped around them as he felt the orbs drilling into him before they exploded, sending him spiraling away into a nearby shop. The golden arm retreated to a Naruto cloaked in golden-orange energy. His hair lightly spiked up to resemble horns. Joining the 2 clones, Naruto looked at where Kuma landed with a hard look. Kurama's chakra radiated off him as he waited to see if Kuma would get up or not. He needed something to catch Kuma off guard in order for his Rasengan to land, and he doubted that he'd expect his extended chakra arm. His body tensed as he saw a large red paw bubble burst out of the dust screen and zoom towards Naruto at incredible speeds. Naruto quickly moved out of the way of the paw but was met with a frenzy of light beams that came out from Kuma's mouth like a machine gun. Explosions rang about as the beams struck out at random, destroying the 2 clones and managing to hit the cloaked Naruto with sheer numbers. Kuma limped out of the ruined building, his shirt in tatters and with 2 large circular wounds on his stomach where Naruto had hit him. Blood dripped from his chin as he stood tall. Despite having pushed out the pain he felt from the Rasengan, the damage he suffered remained and he could tell that a few of his organs had been ruptured. Had he been unable to push out the pain he felt, he likely would be unable to move now. "You're a tough bastard," Naruto said as he stood back up with a smirk. Despite having been hit a few times, he seemed relatively unharmed thanks to Kurama's chakra cloaking him. "But you're out of your weight, class," he said as several chakra arms came out of his back, each one with a large Rasengan in hand. Kuma stood his ground as he prepared to fight against the monster dragon had sent him. However, as Kuma took another step forwards, he fell down as his legs gave out. "You stupid pirate. You could have killed us." The celestial dragon yelled as he stepped out of the auction house that had been hit by a stray beam from Kuma. The man walked towards Kuma and aimed his gun at the man's head. "If you can't beat one measly rebel, then you're as good as dead." The man yelled as he went to shoot the injured Kuma in the head. However, before he could pull the trigger, he felt his arm snap back, the sounds of bones breaking filling the air as Naruto crossed the distance in a second and slapped the gun away. The force behind such a simple act had been enough to nearly tear off the man's arm. "How about you shut up?" Naruto said, his eyes burning into the egotistical man as he bellowed in pain. How dare you? How dare you touch a god?" The man yelled in fury and agony as he held his arm. "A god?" Naruto asked as he felt annoyed by the man. "I have faced plenty of people who claimed to be gods. People who could blow away entire cities in seconds. People who could drop meteors on a whim. People who could warp reality with their power alone," the glowing blonde stated as he recalled everyone he fought who had called themselves gods. "Compared to them, you're nothing," Naruto said, having enough of the man. "Die." Trash like you have no use but as slaves. The man yelled as he grabbed the gun from the floor with his good arm and shot at Naruto only for the bullet to drop down from his cheek. How? He stuttered as his sea stone bullet did nothing against the man. It should have killed any devil fruit user without fail. The man kept trying to shoot Naruto, but all of his bullets fell to the ground, flattened. Naruto looked down at the man as he pulled the gun out of his hands and crushed it in his palm. The man paled as he saw his only weapon destroyed and his bodyguard defeated. Now scram, Naruto growled as the world noble decided that he would rather not fight against someone who took down a Shichibukai and instead wait for an admiral to arrive and take care of that scum for him. As he ran back to the auction house, the smell of piss and shit wafted over them as it was clear that the man had lost control of his bowels. I made him shit himself, he deserved it, Kurama stated as he felt that the man should have died for what he did. The man felt foul. How many lives had he ruined? How many people had he killed? Likely countless. And unlike many of the people they faced in their home reality, he did it all selfishly. Not seeking world peace or to right a wrong, but rather to just show that he was above others. Above all, Kurama hated people who forced their authority on others. Having been sealed away as a weapon time and time again, seen as a source of power for humans to tame, Kurama almost felt a personal fury against these celestial dragons. Naruto sighed as he looked at Kuma who laid motionless beside him. Naruto, we're all set. Dragon's voice came through the snail in his watch. Just in time, Naruto said as he turned to leave only to come face to face with several Marines who were shaking in their boots as they saw that not only had the glowing man taken out one of the Shichibukai, but he assaulted a world noble. Many of them felt that it was useless to face the man, but refused to run away as proud Marines. Uzumaki Naruto. You are under arrest for acts against the world government. Surrender and you'll be allowed to live, for now, the man who seemed to be in charge of the Marine squad declared, but wasn't able to promise that Naruto would live for long since he attacked a celestial dragon. Sorry. But I have to go now, Naruto said before vanishing in a flash of speed, rushing away from the Marines and towards the Wind Grandma much to their surprise. Naruto, what the hell did you do? Dragon's voice yelled through the snail as Marines started to flood throughout the island. Get here ASAP. We need to leave before an admiral shows up. The leader of the revolution commanded, wanting to deal with an admiral at the moment. If he did, he'd likely have to go all out against them to make sure that his crew could get out of their range safely. Just leave. I'll catch up to you, Naruto yelled as bullets started to fly around him. His eyes narrowed as a wave of smoke swept towards him, forcing him to flip back. The smoke gathered into a man with gray hair smoking 2 cigars at once. From the outfit he was wearing, he seemed like a higher-ranked Marine. Behind him a pink-haired woman smoking a cigarette jumped into the roof to join him and the smoke man. Stay safe Naruto, Dragon said, acknowledging that Naruto was willing to let them leave without him in order to keep them safe. So who are you two? Naruto asked as he looked between the man and the woman. From their outfits, it was clear that they were Marines, but of a higher rank than the grunts. It's Commanders Smoker and Hina. The troops below yelled out joy as the two arrived to face him. You're under arrest, Smoker said roughly, smoke escaping from his mouth, or maybe he was doing that on purpose with his devil fruit. He didn't really know or care. However, he didn't particularly feel like dealing with them at the moment. Look, my business here isn't with the two of you or the Marines. But if you get in my way, I'll have to push you out, Naruto told them as he was ready to fight against the two commanders. He saw no reason to power down from his 9 tails chakra mode just yet. From what he had just seen, the gray-haired man seemed to have eaten a Logia devil fruit, supposedly the strongest kind of devil fruit. He became our business when you assaulted a celestial dragon, Smoker said, scowling at the glowing blonde who just sighed knowing that he would likely be unable to just walk away from the conflict. Well, try your best, Naruto said as the two Marines jumped into action. Hina rushing towards him with her arm extended as if attempting to clothesline him while Smoker extended his arms towards him, bellowing smoke at him to ensnare the rebel. Too slow, the shinobi said as he moved out of the way of Hina, spinning around her and kicking her in the back. His eyes widened as her body bent around his leg, wrapping it in iron. The smoke moved around Hina as if it were alive and wrapped around Naruto. Got you, Smoker grunted before he saw a smirk forming on Naruto's face. The commander's eyes widened as his smoke started to twist and swirl around Naruto like a gray storm. Pain shot through his arms from the smoke, like something was grinding against them. Haki? He asked as he knew that one of the few ways to hit a Logia user besides their elemental weakness was through Haki. Raising his hand, Naruto showed that his Rasengan had been the source of the distortion in the smoke, forcing it to move around due to the wind it was whipping up. Haki? That's the thing Dragon said could be used to hurt Logias, right, Kurama? Naruto asked as he dispersed his Rasengan, the burst of air blowing away Smoker's smoke. Flexing his leg, he shattered the iron that Hina had locked around it with ease. I don't sense anything different about you, Kurama replied as he didn't know why Naruto had been able to hit the normally untouchable Smoke Man. Dragon had discussed getting Naruto a sea stone sword in order to fight against Logias, but getting one was harder than just wanting. Perhaps his chakra was interacting weirdly with their powers? Or maybe it was his senjutsu? Smoker retracted his smoke back to his physical form, showing that his arms looked like they had been rubbed against the Rasengan. The hell? He infused Haki into his devil fruit? Smoker questioned as his arms hurt to move from the lacerations all over his skin. He broke Hina's cage so easily. Hina lamented as her iron had been too weak to hold the blonde for even a second. She could tell that they were completely outclassed by the revolutionary. He had beaten Kuma, and he had shown them that even with their devil fruits, they weren't strong enough to face him in battle. They had no chance against him. Damn it, Smoker growled as he hated feeling so weak against a criminal. He would admit that he underestimated Naruto. Someone who could beat a Shichibukai wasn't a weakling. They had hoped that he'd be exhausted from fighting Kuma, but it seemed that he was still up and ready to go. Below, the lower-ranked Marines were starting to panic as one of their commanders had been severely injured and the other seemed disheartened. Naruto looked at the two before turning towards the ocean where the Wind Grandma was sailing. Like I said, my business today wasn't with you, he said as he leapt off the building towards the docks. He knew that an admiral would be on his way soon and he didn't exactly want to test his luck today. He knew we have to keep him busy until Admiral Akainu arrives, Smoker said as his body started to turn to smoke again. However, before they could move, they sensed a powerful presence washing over them. As Naruto looked back over his shoulders with blood-red eyes, they could see the massive silhouette of a long-eared fox with 9 tails swinging wildly behind it. The pressure was crushing. They could see flashes of instances of them dying against him. Different ways in which he could kill them without breaking a sweat. By the time that feeling of dread faded, Naruto was gone. Hina dropped to her knees and vomited, her cigarette extinguished by her puke. You didn't have to do that, Kurama, Naruto said to the fox within him as they reached the pier. They would have kept on coming if I hadn't. At least now we can go without any other interferences, Kurama replied as he admitted that he had used a bit more killing intent than intended. But those two were commanders, from what the grunts had said. He figured that they'd be stronger than that. Running off the docks, he landed on the water and began to run towards the Wind Grandma, much to the shock of everyone watching. It was rare that a man covered in flames came running around. It was unheard of that they would go running in the ocean. Reaching the ship, he ran up the side of it and landed on the deck, much to the shock of the revolutionaries on board. Dragon walked over to the blonde, intrigued by his flaming form. As far as he knew, the mere no Mi had already been eaten, so he assumed that this was one of Naruto's many otherworldly powers. He was rather irate that Naruto had attacked a world noble, but in the end what was done, but he also defended Kuma. You were reckless, Dragon commented as he kept an eye on Naruto's form before it seemed to fade away. But you got the job done, he admitted, having seen that his newest recruit had managed to defeat Kuma in battle. Something that he didn't really expect in reality. He felt bad for his longtime friend. It was clear that the finishing move Naruto used had done a rather large amount of internal damage to him. Even after pushing out his pain and fatigue, the injuries had been too much to keep going. He would have to ask about that new form he showed off later in private. So far no one knew that Naruto was from another universe aside from himself and a few of his top-ranking officers. The panic it would cause would likely be unimaginable if it was found out that there existed other worlds. I couldn't let that asshole shoot Kuma. Even if I was fighting against him, he didn't deserve that, Naruto told the dark-haired man, who nodded in understanding. It was around that time that posters started to drop down from the sky. Thanks for watching, guys.